The Kebet Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess was one of the great rabbis, without doubt, over the thousands of years in Jewish history. I want to speak about the burial plot and maybe the Torah learning structure. We know many Torah institutions that are named Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess, and we've spoken about before the miracles that actually occurred within regards to Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess, respectively, and so much, and can be actually said within regards to this. So I want to speak a bit about within regards to the history of the tomb, the burial plot, and a few more things maybe about the kollels that were actually situated in Tiberius at various occasions in time. So I'll state part of it in Hebrew. I'm going to state over here, and hope you can follow with me. I'm going to try and transliterate it when I can also. So that's something I'm going to point out over here. Makom kavro shel Tana Rabbi Meir מצוי לפי ספרות חז"ל באסיה. לפי התלמוד סוף ימיו נאלץ לגלות לבבל ונקבע באסיה, אך ביקש להניח את ארונו על חוף הים כדי שילקחו גלי ימה של ארץ ישראל את ארונו. הנוסע בנימין מתולדו, there was a great traveler named Benjamin Mitoldo, we've spoken about on various occasions for this. He was around in the 12th century, mentioned him in various videos of history, let's just say, within regards to great countries of yesteryear, and he traveled around and he actually chronicles much over within regards to that. So he actually is going to come and actually speak within regards to this. תיעד קברו של רבי מאיר בבבל, אמנן, באותה תקופה החלו כבר לציין את מקום קברות גם בתחומי ארץ ישראל. רבי שמואל בר שמשון, בין עולי הרגל הראשונים לתעד את קברו בטבריה, מציין את קברו גם בנבוריה, if I'm not mistaken, Navoria, that's Charvat Nir Batin, you could actually call it. I think it was in the Yeshuva Yudi on Har Beira, if I'm not mistaken. Very interesting enough. So, Hechel Meya Shmona Ese, during the, I think, the 18th century it began. Hakebet Nikra al Shem Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess. כי יום הקבר בטבריה נחשב לאחד מקברי הצדיקים המפורסמים בארץ ישראל ובעולם. במתחם הקבר מצוי בית כנסת גדול וכולל. Now we're going to learn that there was a kollel, I think there was a yeshiva structure, or there still is, and a beit knesset over there respectively. So very, very interesting. So so anyone tuning in, we are speaking about the tomb of Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess. So Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Shimshon, if I'm not mistaken, he was, to be precise, just to say, he would actually quote this in of itself. He happened to have been, I think, living in the 13th century, if I'm not mistaken. He was also a traveler. I think he was a French traveler, if I'm not mistaken, and would write down various different writings, let's just say, and I think was dealing with geography, especially within regards to the land of Israel. So that's something that we very much have to point out over here as we are exploring, let's just say, the history within regards to the tomb of Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess. Just a few insights within regards to, and we're going to speak about a little bit maybe within regards to Tiberius and the kollel structure also, which I think is actually very, very important and a good idea over here. Okay, so let's continue. Mesorot HaKeber, I think it was in the year 1170, בשנת 1170 לערך ביקר בבבל הנוסע יהודי המפורסם בנימין מתולדו. So we know that Benjamin Mitoldo would actually move. הוא מציין את קברו של רבי מאיר בעל הנס, חילה ייתכן שמדובר באל חלה, as we said before. So, very interesting. And then it's quoted in parentheses of here. משם 5 פרסאות לחילה, ושם 10,000 ישראל, ובה 4 בתי כנסיות, אחת של רבי מאיר, והוא קבור לפניה. I think it was in the 1180 approximately. ביקר בבבל נוסע יהודי מפורסם נוסף, בשם רבי פתחיה מרגנסבורג, if I'm not mistaken, I hope I pronounced his name correctly. I think he was a famous rabbi at that window in time, if I'm not mistaken. גם הוא ציין את קברו של רבי מאיר בחילה, אך הוסף שהערבים מכנים את הקבר בשם קבר מאיר חנק, ויהודים קבע רבי מאיר חנקי. Now, I think פתחיה מסביר שם, זה באגדה מקומית, לפיה הקבר של רבי מאיר מקודש בעיני היהודים וגם המוסלמים בבבל. הם הקימו מבנה מפואר סביבו, מקושט בדברי פאר. ביניהם אבנים יקרות. יום אחד ביקר הסולטן בקבר, חשק באחת אבנים, וגנב אותו. בלילה הופיע רבי מאיר בחלומו, ותפס בגרונו עד שלא יכול היה לנשום. רבי מאיר הסכים לשחררו, רק אם למחרת קבל עם ועידה, יחצי את האבן למקומו. אכן הסולטן יחצי את האבן, ומאז רבי מאיר קונה החונק. Respectively, he was, I think, given that nickname. So, בהמשך מסוע, פתחיה ביקר גם בעיר Tiberius. I think this Ptachia is actually going to visit Tiberius. Tiberius is one of the 4 holy cities of Israel. שם הראו לו לצד דרום, דרך המי טיבריה, I think the way towards the hot springs of Tiberius, קבר מיוחס לרבי מאיר. קבר, burial plot of רבי מאיר. רבי פתחיה מאיר, זה אינו נכון. היות שרבי מאיר נקבר, לפי בקשתו, על שפת נהר הפרת בבבל, apparently. רבי שמואל בר שמעון, בחיבור מסע the Palestina, if I'm not mistaken, he's going to write the travelings within regards to Eretz Israel. Tiyer et Keber Meir Tiberia. I think Rabbi Shmuel Bar Shimon is going to mention over there, also within regards to that place, maybe in Tiberius, was the burial plot. Elish Rabbi Shmuel Bar Shimon Tiyer et Keber Meir Gamba no Nevoria. This was as we said, Haya Yishuv Yehudi al Har Bira. She'tקיים בימי בית ראשון, תקופת בית שני, ועד תקופה ביזנטית בין שרידי בית כנסת עתיק, רק לסוף, I think towards the end of the 1st century. Okay, very, very interesting. עדות נוספות מסורות קברו בטבריה, באותה תקופה, I think in the year 1215, מצויה בכדי מנחם החברוני. So Rabbi Menachem ben Rabbi Peretz Hevroni also do some writings within regards to this also, respectively. Something we have to point out. Okay, so Rabbi Meir Acher, what's this about? בעוד רוב אולי הרגל מזכירים את קבר רבי מאיר עם התנא רבי מאיר, רבי משה בסולה. I think he lived around the 15th century, Rabbi Moshe Basula, if I'm not mistaken. He was a rabbi, he was a Kabbalist, he was a writer with regards to travels, where he actually went around on various occasions of time. סבור כי אין מדובר בתנא רבי מאיר, יש ציין של אבנים זקוף במישור, ושם מתקבצים להתפלל ערב ובוקר. אומרים כי שם נקבע אחד ששמו רבי מאיר, שנשבע שלא יישב עד כי יבוא שילה, ונקבע עומד, ואיננו סתם רבי מאיר דמתניתין, if I'm not mistaken. Now, Yaakov HaShliach, who was he? I think he lived, he was a French rabbi, I believe. I think he was around during the 13th century, if I'm not mistaken. כתב כי בטבריה קבעו רבי מאיר קצין, חוקרים רבים, כגון פרופסור מאיר שלום, סבורים שמדובר ברב צרפתי, מהעיר קצין, בעלי התוספות ולא רב מאיר התנא. So I think Meir Shalom, if I'm not mistaken, his last name was Friedman. He was a investigator with regards to Judaism, Jewish history, if I'm not mistaken, and did write some books, if I'm not mistaken, which came out. Okay, Hashem Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess מופיע לראשונה בשני ספרים שיצאו לאור במאה ה-16, during the 16th century, the 1500s, books come out, Yachus Avot in the year 1537, Yachus HaTzadikim, which came out in the year 1561. אלה שבהם, גם רישום שהוא קבוע בגוש חלב, ולא בטבריה, בספרו של רבי יחיאל הלפרין, in the Seder Hadrot, if I'm not mistaken, he was a Rosh Yeshiva and a historian also within regards to the Chronicles of Israel. שיצא לאור, I think in the year 1769, 23 שנים לאחר פטירתו מחברו, כתב הלפרין, כי בטבריה קבור רבי מאיר תלמיד אלישע, ובגוש קבור רבי מאיר בעל הנס, והוסיף ולא ידעתי אלו, מה השניים מהם. Rabbi Mordechai Shrabi, also in the 20th century, he was a great rabbi we've spoken before, head of Yeshiva Nahar Shalom, the Kabbalistic Yeshiva. החשיך בתקוף שרב מאיר קבור בטבריה, וסבור כי הקבר המיוחס לתנא רבי מאיר הוא קברו של רבי מאיר שץ, בעל הקדמות לחג השבועות, שחי בזמן של רש"י. Interesting enough, so that's something else we have to point out. Now, this place in of itself, within regards to the burial plot, it started, I think, in the 18th century. התפרסם הקבר בעולם היהודי, בזכות קופות הצדקה, למען עניי נביאי ארץ ישראל, שהופצו תחת השם קופת רבי מאיר בעל הנס, או קופת רמב"ן, קופת צדקה. זו נוסדה בשנת, in the year 1744, it was actually formed, this charitable organization, and this was actually done through the famous Rabbi Chaim Abu Lafia. Remember, he was a famous Shluchei D'Rabbanan for the land of Israel, and was one of the main rabbis of the new Yeshuv, let's say, of the Jewish community in Tiberius. מחדש ישוב היהודי בטבריה באותו עת. רב אבו לאפיה הבין שכדי להעלות את קרנה של טבריה בעולם היהודי ולמשוך עליך מתיישבים, אולי רגל ותרומות. קברו של רבי מאיר התנא אינו מספיק. יש לקשור סביבו הילה אגדתית וניסית שתמשוך קהל רב להשתתח על הקבר ולבקש בקשות שונות באופן פיזי ומשי או מרחוק. בעזרת תרומות, הרב אבו לאפיה גם פרסם את מילות הקריאה המיוחדת בעזרתה יש לפנות לרבי מאיר בעל הנס. אלוהי מאיר, ענני, מילים אלו מופיעות על כל קופסאות הצדקה של רבי מאיר בעל הנס ונאמרים על ידי כל המבקר את קברו. So that's something important. Please everyone do your research to find out if you didn't understand what I said. The English translation, I think it was in the year 1790, בשנת 1790, נעשתה קופת רבי מאיר בעל הנס לקופה משותפת לספרדים ואשכנזים. I think there was a partnership between both the Ashkenazic and the Sephardic communities over there. למרות כספי הצדקה והתרומות שזרמו מכל העולם היהודי, הקבר עצמו נשאר ללא שינוי. תלויות האדמה ועלוי גל אבני בזלת ושחורות. במשך הזמן, אבנים אלו הוסרו במקומן, הונחה אבן גדולה ועגולה. קרוב לוודאי אבן ריחים עתיקה. But I think it was at the start of the 19th century, נבנה מבנה סביב הקבר. אך הוא חרב ברעידת האדמה 1837. I think there was an earthquake in the 1837 that will be, unfortunately, a significant date. And I think about 25 years after that, הונחה אבן ריחיים גדולה נוספת על הקבר. I think they'll put a massive stone inside the קבר. בשנת, I think in the 1866, the Sephardi Kehillah of Tiberius, great one, I'll say it in Hebrew again. הקהילה הספרדית של טבריה גדלה מאוד לאחר גל עליה ממרוקו. I think many people actually come from Morocco and move to Tiberius. ועד הקהילה הספרדית קנה, I think in the year 1866, את חלק האדמה עליו נמצא הקבר מידי הסלטון העות'מאני. They will actually purchase it from the Sultan, the Ottoman Sultan. I think in 1867 נבנה במתחם הקבר בית כנסת שנקרא בשם קטנות אור, ונוסדה ישיבה ספרדית בשם מאיר בת עין. So a yeshiva will be formed, I think in 1867, called the מאיר בת עין. לפי הרשום בעיתון המגיד, מתאריך, I think it was on the 20th of June in 1867, בעת הבנייה אירה גם במקום. הפועלים נאלצו להזיז את אבני הריחיים מעל הקבר והתחייבו להחזירם למקום באותו ערב. למרות מאמצים רבים, הם לא הצליחו להזיז את האבנים חזרה, אך לפני עבדו את תקוותם להצליח. אירע הנס, האבנים נעמדו וחזרו בעצמן למקומן, כאילו לא עזו כלל. תיאור הנס בעיתון גרם לגל של תרומות שזרם מקהילת רבות, מבירות ועד סינגפור. בשנת, I think it was in the year 1900, נוסדה במקום ישיבת אור תורה. I think they would actually form a yeshivat, called ישיבת אור תורה, if I'm not mistaken. בהמשך נבנו בית כנסת וחדרי מלון לעולי רגל. עד מלחמת השחרור התפללו שם גם דייגים מוסלמים, למטרת הצלחה בדייג וניצלות מסורות בים. אתר הקבר מחולק לשני מתחמים, המתחם הספרדי התחתון והמתחם האשכנזי העליון. המתחם הספרדי מתוחזק ומפועל על ידי משפחת וקנין במסורת ירושה של דורות רבים. את המתחם האשכנזי מתחזקת בישיבה אור תורה. I think there was ישיבת אור תורה. במרצף מתחת לאתר נמצאו שני קברים נוספים מיוחסים לתלמידיו של רבי מאיר, רבי סומכוס ורבי שמעון בן אליעזר. So who was that? Rabbi Sumchos, we have to point out, was Sumchos Bar Yosef. He was famous Tana from the 4th or 5th generation of Tanaim. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, who was he? He happened to have been, to be precise, I believe, another Tana, famous Tana from the 5th generation, and one of the Talmudim of Rabbi Meir. I think on the night of Pesach Sheni, Yudalad, Iya Nerechet B'Makom Kilula, Shabbat Pogdim Et Tzion Alfei Mitpalelim, on those specific dates in of itself. So that's very, very interesting. There's Ora Torah, I think, is from the place of the Ashkenazim. There's actually a website at the baalhanes.co.il. There's a specific website that actually illustrates within regards to, I think there's various different, let's say, we know that, just say something about Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess, that we know all throughout the years of the Galut, Am Yisrael relied on the Holy Tana's promise and saw numerous Yeshuot in all areas with regards to Parnasah, Shidduchim, children, health, and more. I think the Kever of Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess, I'm just reading from the website over here, baalhanes.com, which is in Tiberius, and through the years of Galut has been serving as, let's say, a wellspring of brachot, blessings, and miracles for all visitors who come to beseech Hashem for a salvation, for Yeshua, in merit of the Holy Tana buried over there. So very, very interesting. And when instructing, so they actually say about 2,000 years ago, the great Tana, Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess, taught us how to achieve Yeshuot, salvations, even when things seem hopeless. When instructing the prison guard to release his sister-in-law, he told him that if caught, he should say the words Elokah de Meir Aneni, and he will be immediately saved. That's something that we have to point out within regards to him, and many people will actually speak about that, which is very, very interesting. So I think Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess burial site, as we said before, I think according to the website here, was revealed by the Arizal and known for years, along with the story of the structure that was built over it. The original building was destroyed, as we mentioned before, in an earthquake. That was in the year 5597, and was rebuilt many years later. I think in the book, the Sha'ara Gilgulim, Rabbi Chaim Vital, which is Rebbe, the Arizal, who told him about the burial place. He says over here, just quoting the website, my teacher, Zichrono Libracha, told me about Rabbi Meir, that he's buried standing, as people say. I think this rumors, and in brackets it says, rumors claim that Rabbi Meir was buried standing upright, as recorded also in Sefer Masot Eretz Yisrael, letter number 8. I think the reason for this is that Rabbi Meir's Zechut, his merit, continues to protect Am Yisrael after his passing, just as it protected them during his lifetime. Therefore, he's buried standing in order to allude to the fact that his zechut, his merit, stands forever for Am Yisrael. And some explain that the reason is because Rabbi Meir stands ready and prepared for Mashiach's arrival, which, as the Rambam tells us in Hilchot Sanhedrin, it is accepted that in the future they will return to Tiberias first, and from there it will move to the Mikdash. And Rashi, the great commentator, also says, in Tiberias the Sanhedrin ceased, and the Torah waits there until Melech HaMashiach's arrival, the King Mashiach's arrival. Now, the discovery of the Kever's location, I think, is based on the Arizal's words, as quoted in Shara Gilgulim, in the south of Tiberias, as you walk towards the Tiberius hot springs. There are graves of tzaddikim there that are far apart from each other and not all in one place. Their names were mentioned in Sefer HaYichus, and they are Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yirmiyahu. Very, very interesting enough. That's what's actually stated over. And just using the website as an example over here. So more can actually be said within regards to this specific topic over here. And as we are exploring, I think there's various different sugulot the website itself is going to bring about, and so on and so forth. We know that there was various kollels and yeshivot at that point in time of Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess, we have to point out. And I think many people would actually study there, if I'm not mistaken. One of the notable rabbis over there was famous rabbi named Rabbi, if I'm not mistaken, Rabbi Shmuel ben Kiki. I think it actually marks his Hilula actually this week on Yud Gimel Tevet. We're going to speak about him in a minute. I'm just going to take a short 1-minute break, and we're going to come back, friends, over here. So just be patient and wait a minute, and we're going to come back and speak a few words about him, and try and maybe speak about a few other rabbis that were connected to this famous yeshiva institutions over there of Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess. So everyone just be patient, and friends, wait a minute over here, and we will come back. Mm-hmm. Thanks for everyone being patient over here as we're just exploring a bit with regards to the famous area of the burial plot of Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess, who were great rabbis over there of Tiberius, all throughout the various different points in time. One outstanding rabbi, if I'm not mistaken, was Rabbi Shmuel ben Kiki. Marks his Hilula this week. Wants to speak about him for a minute. I think for many years he was maskir of the Kol Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess in Tiberius. He was actually born in the year 1842. He passed away in the year 1919. He was also a famous Payatan. He was head of Jewish court in Tiberius. If I'm not mistaken, he was actually from Rabat in Morocco. He was a famous Darshan, and he was close to other great rabbis, including, I think he would actually get married to Sarah, Rabbanit Sarah, who was the daughter of Rabbi Yosef David Abu Lafia, if I'm not mistaken, who was one of the head rabbis in Tiberius. Very, very interesting enough. So that's very, very something that we have to point out with regards to him. And he was a famous rabbi over there in Tiberius. There was always, I think, a strong Jewish community over there at that point in time. Another notable rabbi is Rabbi Yaakov Cohen Scully, if I'm not mistaken, who he happened to be close to. Also, there was also Rabbi Yaakov Chai Zarikian, who was a key rabbi in Tiberius in this point in time. He lived between 1869 to 1953. He was also Rosh Yeshiva, head of Jewish court in Tiberius, and was a prominent rabbi inside this city. He was actually, if I'm not mistaken, he was actually born in Tiberius. And he lived about 84 years, if I'm not mistaken. So he was also very and close to various other famous rabbis, including Rabbi Chaim David Satan, or Habib Satan, if I'm not mistaken, and Rabbi Benjamin Chamvi. And he was also, if I'm not mistaken, he would have an integral part with regards to Mostot Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess. Also, we have to point out that many rabbis that would have a connection. Within regards to this, we have to point out Rabbi Shmuel ben Kiki, who's spoken about before. Many of the rabbis, if they were living in Tiberius, would be very, very much connected to this famous, let's say, Kollel, Torah institution in of itself of Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess. So that's something we have to point out. Tiberius had boasted many great rabbis of recent years. That's something that we have to point out. In of itself recently. Anyone that's tuning in live at the moment, welcome to our community. We are speaking about the Jewish history of the famous tomb of Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess over here, which is very, very important, I believe, to let's speak about Tiberius in of itself. I think just to go back to that specific period, there's so much to talk about from the British mandate time period, and so on and so forth. I think what we did mention about Rabbi Chaim Abu Lafia, who would rebuild the Jewish community there originally. He would build a synagogue over there, which stands today. And it's actually interesting. I think if we go back a little bit, in 1775, the Ahmed El Jazar, who was brought peace to the region with an iron fist. It's actually chronicled over here in Wikipedia. I think in 1780, many Polish Jews would settle inside the town of Tiberius. And 19th century, there was an influx of rabbis who re-established it as a center for Jewish learning. And someone named Rabbi Joseph Schwartz, I think in 1850, noted that Tiberius Jews suffered the least during an Arab rebellion which took place in the year 1834. About 600, including nearly 500 Jews died when the town was devastated by the 1837 Galil earthquake, as we mentioned about before. And I think an American expedition reports that Tiberius was still in a state of disrepair. Many years later, in 1847, 1848, Rabbi Shmuel HaKohen, Rabbi Chaim Shmuel HaKohen Konorti, who was born in Spain in 1792, would settle in Tiberius at the age of 45 and was a driving force within regards to restoration of the city. Remember, the Kollel Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess was an integral part within regards to it, which we have to point out. There was, I think, in the 19th century, Greek Orthodox Patriarch of Jerusalem would purchase lands there that were incorporated into, let's say, the growing network of rural states during British mandate of Palestine. I think in 1922, it was conducted a census that Tiberius had a population of 6,950 inhabitants, which had the majority were Jewish people, 4,427, we have to point out. I think there was there was relationships weren't so bad between Arabs and Jews, and only a few incidents would occur, I think, especially during the Nebi Musa riots in 1920, where the Arabs rioted throughout Palestine to 1929. And I think the first modern spa would be built in the year 1929. We have to point out, I think there was a great flood of 11th of November 1934, which was a key date. Also, I think on October 1938, Arab terrorists would murder 19 Jews in Tiberius during the, let's say, the revolt of the 1936 and 1939 Arab revolt at that point in time. So, yeah, very, very interesting. So that's something that we point out. And there was a destruction of the old city during the months after occupation of the city. I think a large part of the buildings of the old city in Tiberias were destroyed. And there was problems of hygiene, let's say construction, fear that Arabs would return to the city when it became known that this was a requirement of Jordan as part of the negotiations, which was conducted in Rhodes, if I'm not mistaken. And authorities will accede, I think, eventually to the initiative of Jewish National Fund, JNF, someone named Yosef Nachmani, who argued that the houses of the old city should be demolished despite the opposition of Mayor Shimon Dahan. And destruction, I think it would start in 1948 and will continue, if I'm not mistaken, until the months of 1949. I think David Ben-Gurion famously would visit the city and brought an end to the destruction. And I think after 477 out of 696 houses were destroyed, after the destruction remained the remains of the wall and the citadel, several houses on the outskirts of the city, as well as I think there were 2 mosques also that would operate inside that specific area. That the area, I think, would stand abandoned for decades until operations began to restore in the 1970s, respectively. That's something that we have to point out over here on this special edition over here. Well, at the State of Israel, let's talk about it. Remember, this place of the Kever of Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess is very, very important to state out over here. So just to mention it, I think the city of Tiberias has almost been Jewish since 1948. Many Sephardic Jewish people have settled here, especially following the Jewish exodus from Arab countries, the Sephardic ones. Over time, I think government housing was built to accommodate much of the new population. There was a Wadi Salib riots in 1959, if I'm not mistaken. The Union des Nords Afrikaans, led by David Ben Harouche, organized a large-scale procession walking towards the nice suburbs of Haifa, creating little damage, but a great fear there was, I think, within the population at that point in time. And this city itself will rely on tourism. It will become a major Galilean center for internal Israeli tourism. I think other religions also have their own pilgrimages. Let's say an ancient cemetery of Tiberias and its old synagogues draw huge amounts of Jewish pilgrims and religious holidays. We have to point out also. I think there's a new, in 2012, there was an announcement of a new ultra-Orthodox neighborhood in Tiberias called Kiryat Sands. On the slope on the western side of the Kinneret, if I'm not mistaken, there's a small port on the shores of the Galil lake for both fishing and tourist activities, which we have to point out also. And the demographics, yeah, I think now there's nearly 50,000 inhabitants as of August 2023, which we also have to point out over there. A lot of archaeology also, let's just say, that was uncovered at various points of time. And very famous people over there through Tiberias, all throughout the centuries. That's something that we have to point out over here within regards to Tiberias. Remember, Tiberias is one of the 4 holy cities of Israel, along with Hebron and also Tzfat and Jerusalem. We're going to speak about a few more of the famous rabbis of Tiberias of various different points in time in a minute. I would like to speak about that, and we'll come back. Remember, we're speaking also about the Kol Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess and a bit of information within regards to Tiberias. We're just going to take another 1-minute break, and we'll be back in 1 minute, friends. Hi, Shalom everyone. Thanks for being patient over here. Let's speak about a few famous Tiberius rabbis also. Obviously, Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess. We already spoke about the great rabbi already. Who else lived in Tiberius? Remember, many people in Tiberius would be, these rabbis would be part of the kollels over there, and that structure where there was the kever, the burial plot of Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess. Rabbi Yaakov HaKohen Eskeli, another rabbi we recorded about on this series over here. He was born actually in 1846 in Tiberias. He passed away in 1918. He was a famous Sephardic rabbi in Tiberias, which is obviously part of Ottoman Palestine. He was of Moroccan descent, but I think the name Sekili indicates his family originated from Sicily. And he was a Dayan over there in Tiberias, was very well respected. He was nurtured. He had many, many great disciples and a prolific writer, authored great works including Yakut Talmud Torah, Torat Mincha, Gudlat Sektoret, and various other books. Now, he was instrumental in the erection of a synagogue and lodgings for pilgrims at the tomb of the 2nd century sage, Rabbi Meir, on the outskirts of Tiberias. So he would have an integral part, Rabbi Yaakov HaKohen Skeli. With regards to the kollel, Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess, that's the first thing that we have to point out. Within regards to him, I think that many great chroniclers will actually write about him, including the famous Moshe David Gaon, if I'm not mistaken. Now, other great rabbis would include, who we should point out, in Tiberias all throughout Jewish history, Rabbi Yohanan Bar Napaha, who was known as Rabbi Yochanan, who was a leading rabbi and second-generation Amora during the Talmudic era. And we have to point out, there was Rabbi Yisrael Ber Odesser, who was born actually in Tiberias, I think in the year 1888. He passed away, I think, according to some opinions, 1994. That would have made him more than 100 years old. According to another opinion, he was 112. Very, very interesting. He was a famous Breslov rabbi, if I'm not mistaken, very much part of Tiberias, and great rabbi of that point in time. I think he probably passed away at the age of 106, if I'm not mistaken. And I think his great-great-grandfather was Rabbi Yekutiel Zan Leib, who was a disciple of Rabbi Abraham Kaliska, major disciple of the famous Baal Shem Tov, if I'm not mistaken. So that's very, very interesting. He had, I think, famously, a correspondence with Rabbi Zalman Shazar, if I'm not mistaken. And very, very interesting. A huge, connection with the Na'ana Nachman Uman movement, if I'm not mistaken, and I think he would, have many followers to Breslov he would bring about, we have to point out. And he would go to various places, including Meron, Sfat, Tiberias, Ramat Gan, Bnei Brak, Beit Am, Zion, and various Jerusalem neighborhoods. Also, we have to point out, he was a key rabbi, I believe, in Tiberias. We have to point out. Another rabbi, Rabbi Yaakov Moshe Toledan, another famous rabbi. He would have many connections to Tiberias. Also, he was chief rabbi also of Cairo at one window of time. He was an Israeli rabbi who served minister of religions of Israel for 2 brief periods, I think in 1958 and 1960. I think he actually emigrated from Mekinus to Israel originally, and very much was around the time period of the Second World War. The First World War especially, and I think he was one of 700 Jews expelled by the Ottoman authorities due to holding French citizenship. He would have to move to Corsica, if I'm not mistaken, in time. And he would take on various different governmental positions also. He would become a chief Sephardi rabbi of Tel Aviv also, we have to point out. But he would, for a period of time, I believe, he would also be very, very much involved in Tiberias. So that's something that we have to point about. He was born in Tiberias in 1880. And I think Rabbi Toledano's family moved to Pekin because there was a cholera outbreak in Tiberias in the year 1903. That he would be about 23 years of age. I think he returned to Tiberias in 1920, and he was about 40 years of age at that stage in time. So, and he participated in a rabbinical conference in Jerusalem that would establish chief rabbinate at that point in time. What's interesting, I think Rabbi Toledano would also purchase land from local Arabs around the tomb of Maimonides and tomb of Rabbi Akiva. He built a wall around the tomb of Maimonides and financed the establishment of several new neighborhoods. So we can see the great work many of these rabbis performed at various stages of time. That's something that we very much have to point out over here on this special edition. So much more can be said within regards to the Kollel. Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess would like to speak about that more, maybe at another time. Hopefully at one stage in time, we will hopefully do a video on the history of Tiberius, to get an entire, let's say, background within regards to that. So very, very interesting. So yeah, I think there's many different charitable organizations connected to Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess. And there's various different websites also, I think, connected to various different countries that we have to point out also. So that's very, very interesting. Now, everyone, welcome if you're new here onto the channel, and welcome to the community as we are exploring about the Kollel Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess, the burial plot of Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess. We spoke about Rabbi Chaim Abulafia, especially at that point in time, and how Rabbi Abulafia will revive the area, and various different communities will see an attraction, let's just say, to this specific land, respectively. So so much can be said within regards to it, and there's various different articles on the internet, in-depth articles. I think Hasidim, for example, will arrive in 1777 to help revive the Jewish community. But this earthquake in 1837 really did, if I'm not mistaken, cause huge problems. I think there was 50 families that lived in the city under the Crusaders from the 12th to 13th centuries. In the 16th century, when thousands of Sephardic Jews settled in Ottoman Palestine, Tiberius would become a center of spiritual and economic activity. There were, in the earlier days, two very influential and wealthy Jews, someone named Donna Gracia Mendez and her nephew Don Joseph Nasi, set out to rebuild the city as a Jewish commonwealth that would be a center for silk making, a refuge for the persecuted Jews from the Papal States. And I think the plan actually fell through when the Ottomans went to war with the Republic of Venice, if I'm not mistaken. We know that later in the 19th century, a modern Jewish community was established over there, served as center of new communities found in the eastern Lower Galil in the beginning of the 20th century. And I think in 1920, construction began on a new neighborhood called Kiryat Shmuel over there on the slope of the city. Hot Springs became a Jewish concession, I think, around that period of time. In 1922, nearly 4,500 Jews would also live there. I think during the War of Independence, Arab-Jewish fighting in the city ended in, let's say, a brief truce, and then resumed, I think, at a later stage in time. As I said before, the community in Tiberius has 42,000 residents, approximately from Morocco, Tunisia, former Soviet Union, South America, Ethiopia. There's most synagogues full of the Sephardic or Mizrahi rite over there. There are some small yeshivot we have to point out, and many places also to visit. But the spiritual part of it, the blue domed tomb complex of Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess. Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess means Rabbi Meir, the miracle worker, who was one of the greatest Talmudic sages in the 2nd century Common Era. He asked to be buried upright, as we mentioned before, to await the redemption and greet the Messiah. The miracle in question was a rescue with divine intervention of his sister-in-law from captivity in a Roman brothel, if I'm not mistaken. I actually said over here. The site includes synagogues and yeshivot, as I mentioned before, because there was kollels and learning institutions over there. That's something that we have to point out. So, friends, everyone tuned in live, thanks. Welcome to our community. We are over here. We explored a little bit with regards to the burial plot of Rabbi Meir Baal HaNess, and I'm recording this just before the fast day of Asara B'Tevet, which actually is going to fall, I believe, just in a very early morning tomorrow. We have to point out. So so everyone that's going to be fasting, I wish you a meaningful fast. Hopefully, we're going to see the rebuilding of the Bet HaMikdash ASAP. Or we want it. We want Moshiach now. That's a phrase to do. And if you haven't joined our community yet, please join. We've got many great content here on this channel, including we do tours all over Israel, especially in Jerusalem and in the city of Bet Shemesh. That's something that we have to point out. And we record great Jewish personalities here of modern era. Various different personalities have been very privileged to have recorded with probably at least 500 people. So that's absolutely staggering. And hopefully at one stage we'll be able to visit Tiberius. That'll be definitely a dream, to go and travel to various different places and actually live and experience the places that we happen to be speaking about on this channel, because I think it's much, much more potent and much, much more gives a feeling of what we're actually learning over here. So everyone, wishing you well over the fast. I think I'm going to call it tonight, and make the most of it, and hopefully we'll see the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash. I hope this was informative, and please, friends, don't forget also to subscribe to the channel. So have a good night, and thank you for watching.